So before I get started, can somebody let me know what time it is? 2:15, perfect. I was supposed to be on stage at 1, so I'm gonna celebrate myself and making it here on time today. I'm not always so lucky. And I'm so glad that I did, because I get to share a story with you that hopefully inspires you to see the world and its beautiful brains differently. And that story starts right here. This is the apartment of a 30-year-old woman who's at the height of her career as an educator. She's just received her master's degree with honors from a very prestigious university, and she's respected and revered by all of her peers and loved ones. I mean, she's creative, she's savvy, she's a force when she walks in the room. And she loved buying books on decluttering and organization. I mean, shout out to Marie Kondo. And I think at some point, all of these things brought her joy. And I know because that 30-year-old woman was me. And I know what you're thinking. She should be ashamed of herself. And I am. And I can't believe I'm sharing one of my most hidden and shameful secrets with a room full of strangers, but here we are. Shortly after this picture was taken, I moved in with my mom, reluctantly so. I said, I just won't be like that this time. I'll try harder. I mean, I do know how to clean after all. And I failed. And my mom quickly let me know that my anti-Pinterest boy way of living reminded her of a 9-year-old girl that she once knew, me. And I was on the defense. I said, I'm grown, I'm educated, and I have a big girl job. And when my ego finally took a seat, I sat with it. And I said, she's right. This was a pattern that had followed me throughout my life. 9, 19, first college dorm, first apartment, all defaulted back here. So I decided it was time to find some answers. And so through a little access and some privilege, I was able to learn that I had been barebacking life with a condition called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or what you might know as ADHD. But what comes to mind when you hear the words ADHD? Would you consider it to be a disability? Or maybe something that was made up because we're all a little ADHD? Or maybe you think about school children that have a hard time sitting in their desk and make it difficult to teach a class of 20+ children. Trust me, I've been there. You see, those school children, whether they're diagnosed or not, become adults with ADHD. Because you don't just outgrow that. And those report card comments about excessive talking becomes interrupting friends and coworkers in conversation. And those missing assignments becomes trouble meeting deadlines. And those tardies become chronic lateness. And messy backpacks and messy desks become this. Disorganized living spaces. And I don't know if it's the name itself, because who wants a deficit disorder, or if it's the way it's portrayed on media, but I don't think the general population really understands how ADHD works. And no, ADHD is not caused by bad parenting or too much sugar or cell phones. It's a brain-based condition that impacts about 4% of American adults, and most of them don't even know. And at its very core, people with ADHD are struggling with executive functioning. And executive functioning are those skills that help your brain regulate all the information that it's processing. So those are the things that can help us plan, prioritize, organize, even control your emotions or start a task. The symptoms of ADHD are on a spectrum. So currently there are 3 subtypes of ADHD that are recognized. First, we'll talk about the hyperactive type. And people that are dealing with the hyperactive type, their symptoms are kind of easy to see. They might be fidgety, impulsive, have a hard time sitting in their desk, and talk excessively. Then you have your inattentive type. Those aren't so hard. Those aren't so easy to see, but what you might deal with there, someone might be daydreaming, overlook small details, or have trouble starting and finishing tasks. Or you can be, like me, and be combined type, which means that an individual has traits of both hyperactive and inattentive type. So that means I'm guaranteed to do 2 things: go on a tangent and have a typo. So what that led to for me, so where we at? So I'm going to try to describe the ADHD experience to you using a cell phone. On a typical day, the internal processor of your cell phone can regulate information pretty normally. You can send a text message, take a picture, scroll your Twitter feed, no problem. And then there's days where there's an abundance of information coming into your phone. You are downloading your favorite music, you're streaming your favorite podcasts, you're saving your favorite GIFs and memes, you're texting your friends, and you're even doing the new TikTok dance with your family. There's an abundance of information coming into that phone, and what we might see on the outside is some delays, you might see freezing, glitching, or even a full-blown shutdown. My experience with ADHD is like that second phone. It's an abundance of information all the time with the inability to regulate it in a typical way. So what that led to for me was a lifetime of adopting false beliefs about myself, that I was lazy or that I wasn't dependable, that I was messy or nasty, or that I didn't care about my friends and loved ones. And what I've learned is that ADHD symptoms are not character flaws. It's a very real experience that can be debilitating for the people that live with the condition. I'm not lazy, but my brain does need time to process large tasks. And it's not that I'm not dependable, but I do have a skewed sense of time. I love my friends and loved ones, but I deal with a symptom called object permanence, which literally means out of sight, out of mind. And if something is not in my clear view of vision, I might forget that it exists, and people are not exempt. So for me as a Black woman with ADHD, I found myself spending a lot of energy trying to hide and cover up what I felt like I was going through. In the ADHD community, we call that masking. And eventually I could not keep up with that facade, and my number one coping mechanism became hiding. And that hiding eventually led to isolation, and that isolation eventually led to depression, and I was completely burnt out. I'd like to add that ADHD symptoms are real. I've said that before, but they're compounded for people that are in marginalized communities. Studies show that Black and brown people that have ADHD they experience punishment, policing, and increased interactions with the criminal justice system. So what that leads us to educational push out because they couldn't stay on their desk, and it also leads to job loss because you can't keep a job if you can't show up on time. And then also increased interactions with the criminal justice system. You can't control your emotions or you're impulsive, could easily lead to jail. So for me, I was trying to navigate those biases and stereotypes so that I too can have access to some opportunity. And eventually I could not keep up with that facade. It led to severe burnout. And so while living with ADHD was an Achilles heel for me, what really took me to my lowest point was the shame that came with it. And for us to really understand the experience of shame, I'd like to lean on the fairy shameless godmother herself, Brené Brown. Brené Brown describes shame as a painful feeling or experience of believing that you're so flawed and therefore unworthy of connection and belonging. It was shame that had robbed me of the fullness of my life. Shame is the reason that I never applied to pharmacy school, even though I love science and helping people. Shame is the reason I never hosted that vegan dinner for my friends, even though I want to host and be an entertainer. I want to have people over. Shame is what kept me tucked away in the clutter of that apartment. You see, shame leaves people in a state of paralysis, and we have to pay it attention because it's also highly correlated with addiction, depression, and even suicide. Because the world as we know it wasn't created for brain-based differences, the ones that you can't see. The world as we know it was created for normal's not a real thing, neurotypical minds. And by neurotypical, I just mean anyone whose brain functioning and processing fits within dominant societal standards. You see, people with conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, or even bipolar disorder are considered to be neurodivergent. And by neurodivergent, I just mean anyone whose brain processing and functioning deviates from that societal norm. And so I got curious, like many ADHDers tend to do, and I was reminded of a lesson that I would teach as a middle school science teacher. It was an ecology lesson over biodiversity. And I would teach my students that an ecosystem having varieties and differences was in fact a good thing. And that the more variety and differences that the ecosystem had, it increases its chances of sustainability. And so what I learned is that that same parallel runs true even for our human brains. And it lies in a word called neurodiversity. Neuro meaning brain, diversity meaning differences. Neurodiversity is the natural variation of the human brain. It considers the individual and their strengths and shortcomings because we all have them. Different brains, different ways of thinking, innovating, and problem solving is in fact a good thing and can increase the sustainability of our society. And I don't know if I'm too much of a science nerd or what, but the idea of neurodiversity freed me. I was finally able to see myself outside of my cluttered mind and my cluttered self-worth. And then in almost perfect timing, I heard one of those cutesy disorganization shows, and it was this ableist quote that said, "Clutter is just a series of unmade choices." And I said, oh, that's good. I just need to make a choice. My life will be fixed. And so I did, and I made the most important choice of my life. I made the radical choice to see, accept, and love myself for who I was as I was. And so I decided it was time to clean up. And first I decided to tidy up that shame and stigma around my brain-based differences. And then I decided I needed to start to organize that internalized ableism that I have for myself. And then finally I started to tidy the perfectionism and some of those cultural norms like respectability politics so that I could stand here and be free and see myself for the first time. And I said, ain't no shame in my brain. Okay, y'all, I'm from the South, and I went to the black church, okay? And we do a lot of call and response, so y'all gonna have to join me. So when I say ain't no shame, I would love it if you guys said in my brain. Okay, so we're gonna try it. Ain't no shame. In my brain. Ain't no shame. In my brain. And there's no shame in yours either. If we could figure out a way to lean into our strengths and support our shortcomings, we can truly access our full potential as a society. So the question is, how do we create safe, shameless environments that are good for every body and brain? And I think the answer is that we have to get straight A's. Now, if I truly dove into all four of these, it would be another TED Talk, and we don't have that kind of time, but I at least want to give you something to think about before you leave. Awareness. You have your first step by hearing my story today. ADHD is real, but it remains a privileged diagnosis. There are disparities amongst women and people of color for knowing that about themselves. Knowing that I had ADHD completely shifted the way I saw myself in the world, and I know that there are people struggling today. So if you're even at home and you know that you can relate to some things that I was going to, please go find and seek help. Acceptance. Neurodiversity is natural and should be seen as a valuable part of our society. Some of the greatest contributions in this world were from an ADHD brain. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share some of my inspirations. Michael Jordan, an ADHD brain. Jim Carrey, an ADHD brain. Steve Jobs, an ADHD brain. And Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter Solange, who happens to be the sister of Beyonce, is also an ADHD brain. And then finally, we have to get into, so that part was the empathy, but then the other half is a little bit of equity. There's accommodation. ADHD is a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So when we're asking those that are neurodivergent to function in a neurotypical society, you have to understand that at times they are unable to. So systems and support are key to being able to access the strengths that we can lean on from neurodivergent people. So that might look like workplace accommodations. For example, it's flexible start and stop times, or maybe someone can have the choice of working from home. And then finally, there's advocacy. The best thing that happened to me was sharing my story with the internet. Gotta love the internet, strangers. And I was able to find so many women who could identify with my struggle. And while I know we fear labels, understand that labels lead to community. And community leads to answers and healing. And I want to shout out my own group, Sisters with ADHD, which is an ADHD advocacy group that centers the experiences of Black women with ADHD. And before I leave, I'd like to clean up some things with my 9-year-old self. Dear Torian, I see you, I love you, and I accept you just as you are. You are both chaotic and creative because you have ADHD. And while your beautiful brain is different, it is not broken. And learning how to work with your brain and not against it will be your greatest gift if you would allow it to be. You don't have to twist and contort yourself so that you feel worthy in this world. And understand on this journey of life that some days will be full of pleasure and some with pain. And on those hard days, just remember that ain't no shame. Thank you.